This conference will now be recorded.
Good afternoon, everyone, and thanks for joining us today with the special board meeting of the West Basin Municipal Water District. This is March the 10th, and the time is 3:48. And looks like we have, I'm going to call the meeting to order, and we have a quorum. And now I move to item number 3, which is public comments. Mr. General Manager, any public comment?
No, President Williams, I've not received any requests for public comment at this point.
Next, then we'll go to presentations.
Again, President Williams, no presentations today.
How about action calendar?
Yes.
Looks like we have 2 items.
That's correct. So again, good afternoon, Ms. Rainey. Good afternoon, board members and staff. We have 2, as you mentioned, President Williams, we have 2 items on the agenda this afternoon. The first one is the pertaining to the request for proposals for the recycled water distribution system, the operation and maintenance of the distribution system, which is currently under contract with Cal Water. And you'll recall, maybe we brought this to committee before in December. I believe the board in January, where it was determined to go with an RFP, and we came back in February. And we had some good input and discussion on the scope of work. And now here we are in March at the special board meeting to hopefully get this, have a final discussion on this and get it processed. But we do have some short presentation, I believe, here from Frank Fuchs, who is our operations supervisor. Frank, would you like to walk us through this, please?
Thank you, Patrick. Good afternoon, directors. So as Patrick mentioned, West Basin contracts with California Water Service Company to operate and maintain West Basin's recycled water distribution system. And as he mentioned, our current agreement with Cal Water is set to expire June 30th of this year. And in January of this year, the board directed staff to issue a request for proposals for the future operations and maintenance of the distribution system. And in addition, the board requested that the scope of work for the RFP be submitted to the board for review. The scope was presented at the February Engineering and Operations Committee meeting. And at this meeting, staff was asked to evaluate whether certain tasks could be implemented by West Basin staff, such as meter reading, chemical purchases, meter calibrations, and water quality sampling. In addition, staff was asked to consider establishing on-call service agreements with contractors to implement repairs as well. And staff has updated the scope to exclude meter reading and meter calibration tasks so that these can be implemented by West Basin staff. In addition, we removed a task for the contract operator to surveil the distribution system. This is something that can be implemented as part of their normal operations or maintenance of different tasks in the distribution system. And in addition, we removed landscape maintenance. This can be incorporated as part of a existing or an agreement that West Basin has for landscaping of the rest of our sites. However, staff recommends that the contract operator collect monthly water samples for the 30 locations throughout the distribution system. The O&M contractor will also be responsible for collecting water samples as part of the operation of the disinfection stations. And so they will be tasked to help improve water quality. In addition, staff also recommends that the contract operator maintain the ability to purchase and coordinate deliveries of the sodium hypochlorite for the disinfection stations. Overall, the district has spent an average of $4,300 per year in sodium hypochlorite costs over the last 4.5 years. And in this current agreement, the district has paid a markup cost of $430 for these chemical costs. So overall, this is not a very large cost, and we're recommending that the contract operator still purchase and coordinate these deliveries, and this would allow for guarantee accountability for the safe delivery and the refill of the chemical tanks. And lastly, staff also recommends maintaining the responsibility for emergency and non-emergency repairs into scope. Having the contract in both those types of repairs would allow for a single point of contact and accountability for the overall response and coordination of repairs with one contractor. So, and then lastly, I want to mention that the RFP is scheduled to be issued this month in order to obtain proposals by April of this year, and to be able to provide a recommendation to the board in May of this year as well. So with that, I'll read the recommendation. The recommendation is that the board approve the general manager to issue a request for proposals for the operations and maintenance of the recycled water distribution system with the scope of work provided in attachment A. And with that, I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Okay, Frank, thank you for that report. All right, the board, you've heard the report. What's your pleasure? Any questions?
Mr. President, I'll move the item.
Okay, it's been moved by Director Gray. Is there a second? Hello?
I'll
I'll
second.
second it. There's no one second. I'll second it.
Can you hear me?
I can hear you.
Yeah, I wanted a second. I tried a second.
Okay, well, you got it.
All right, thanks.
Second by Director Deere. Any further discussion? We call for the vote. We go with Director Deere,
Yes.
Director Houston,
Yes.
Director Alvarez,
Yes.
Director Gray.
Yes,
Okay, the item has been approved. So we'll be going out to bid. What date is that now?
We are planning.
The plan is to issue it in the next couple of days.
Okay,
Mr. President, you did not vote, Mr. President.
well, let me do that.
All right.
My vote is yes. Thank you. All right, that takes care of item number 1, or should I say 5A. Now we on to 5B. Staff report, please.
Yeah, thank you, President Williams. Yeah, this item pertains to an Assembly Bill 963 titled the Baldwin Hills Conservancy Urban Watersheds Conservancy Expansion. And it came to our attention a couple of different ways, but Director Houston had asked me to put this on the agenda so we could consider taking some kind of position on this particular Assembly Bill, which has a few key kind of components. One is a renaming of the Conservancy potentially, and expanding its sort of existence beyond 2026. And then thirdly, expanding the jurisdiction to include the watershed, the Bayona Creek watershed. So we have EJ Caldwell. There you are, EJ. EJ has done quite a bit of research on fairly short notice to evaluate that. Can you do the presentation, please, EJ?
Yes, thank you very much, Patrick. The item before you, as Patrick mentioned, is Assembly Bill 963 by Assemblywoman Kamlager, who represents Culver City and portions of unincorporated area of LA County. It is entitled the Baldwin Hills Conservancy Urban Watersheds Conservancy Act. This is an identical bill that was introduced last year. Unfortunately, last year, possibly due to COVID, the bill actually was never assigned to a committee, and ultimately was never actually heard by the California State Legislature, so it did not move forward. As Patrick mentioned, there are a couple of, I would say, technical pieces to this legislation. It would eliminate what is called the sunset date of what is now the Baldwin Hills Conservancy. That entity is expected to wind down by January 1st of 2026. So this would actually remove that. So it would actually be an entity in perpetuity or until they choose to wind down. Secondly, it does actually change the name of the organization to reflect the expansion of the authority that is proposed within the legislation. And then I think as you transition now into some of the key components of the legislation that I think most people are focusing in on is it does actually amend the governance structure of the new entity, and it does expand the boundaries of what is now the Baldwin Hills Conservancy to include the southern Ballona Creek watershed, as well as the upper Dominguez Channel area. Now, obviously, in looking at this legislation, and I think staff did circulate an overview sheet. You know, the legislation does provide, or the information sheet does provide a solution. It does note that this bill would allow some of these additional territories to access grant funding. It doesn't, the information sheet does not do a very good job of maybe identifying the issue. So it provides a solution, but maybe not the issue. One would look at this and say that these regions have been very successful as far as accessing grant funds, perhaps being incorporated into what is now the Baldwin Hills Conservancy would provide additional opportunities. But I think that one issue that could arise would be the areas in which they seek to expand to. And I would highlight the Ballona Creek watershed. And just from some personal experience, and I know that several of our directors have had experiences related to the Ballona wetlands, the Ballona Creek, and the wider scope of the Ballona Creek watershed, there are numerous stakeholders within that region. My gut feeling is that there will be some concern related to this legislation. There will be people that are opposed or stakeholders that are opposed to this legislation. And so that was ultimately the red flag for West Basin staff. It has been communicated to us that this bill is ultimately going to be, or is likely to be amended to shrink the expansion that is currently noted within the legislation. And because we are expecting the bill to be amended, staff at this time does not have a recommendation. However, we did receive notice of this legislation, and it was requested that we bring this to the board for support. So as such, staff is bringing it to the committee, or excuse me, ultimately to the board for potential position on this legislation. And I will close with just one additional note. The bill has actually been referred to the Assembly Natural Resources Committee. So that initial step has been made. However, no hearing has been set. And I did contact the Assembly Natural Resources Committee to see if and when. They said that they weren't sure at this time. So we do have kind of this opportunity, I think, to wait and see if those amendments come through. But to date, the bill has not yet been amended. So that is staff's report on this item. Again, Assembly Bill 963, and I'm happy to answer any questions you might have.
Thank you very much, DJ, for that. You always do a great job. Hey, listen, just quickly, now that the Assemblywoman is now a state senator, what does that do to the bill, if anything?
So typically, the Assemblywoman, or now senator, would find a new author in the Assembly to author this bill. So there would be a transition as far as the authorship goes. Obviously, she could do a gut and amend with another bill in the Senate, but this bill currently sits in an Assembly committee, so she would not be able to move that bill unless there was another Assembly member that was willing to take that item on.
Okay, well, thank you. All right, questions, please. I'm sure that Director Houston, since you brought it forward, that you would like to comment on this.
Sure. Thank you, Mr. President. Obviously, some folks reached out to me, of course, and I think they may have even reached out directly to West Basin, but certainly they had sent me an email and I forwarded it to staff and asked staff to bring it forward because obviously there's folks interested in supporting this bill and it is in our service area. So I'm glad that you brought that to us, EJ and Pat. You know, I can understand where we may want to see if it goes through or is there some changes, but I don't see a reason not to lend our voice to it at this time, quite frankly. You know, I did speak with the assembly member briefly about it. She's now going to be a state senator, as you guys mentioned. And also the fact sheet that was provided, I asked that get circulated to our colleagues this morning. And to be honest with you, I see some good organizations that are supportive of this bill, including my own city of El Segundo, as well as the LA Conservation Corps, who we've worked with in the past, and the Bionic Creek Renaissance, which is a prominent group up in Culver City. So, and I think also Mr. McNeil, maybe David McNeil, had also reached out to us about this, you know, from the Conservancy as well. So there's been multiple folks who asked us to look at it. I think that's fair. So I would be inclined to move the item with a support position from West Basin.
Okay. Is there a second? Or is that a motion?
I'd say it's a motion.
Okay. Is there a second?
I'll go ahead and second the motion. I do have a question.
Yes,
What
Director
was
Elbert.
in the staff report, it was mentioned that there was going to be an amendment to the bill already. Can you clarify exactly what that is with the Bologna wetlands?
So staff's understanding is that they would be amending a large component of the bill, which is the regions that they expect to expand to. And staff's understanding is that that is because there are stakeholders that would object to this. Again, by allowing this expansion, if you look at the bill, and I believe you have it there in front of you, it would allow this new entity to carry out projects and activities to further the purposes of the division throughout this region. And for those who've had some experience in the Biona wetlands, and I speak, you know, I know that Director Gray represents West Basin on the San Monica Bay Restoration Commission. This region is very, it's very important to a lot of different stakeholders, and it means a lot of different things to a lot of different stakeholders. I've never been a part of or been involved in any aspect of the Biona Creek watershed that did not have a large group in favor, a large group in oppose, and a large group that are trying to figure out what it is that's trying to be accomplished. It's just a very sensitive area. And so without that amendment and seeing that amended into the bill, it's tough for staff to say who could possibly object to it. You know, the information sheet that we have is a information document that is provided by the author. You'll notice that there is no opposition identified in there. However, allowing for additional time would actually allow the assembly committee to take letters to identify the opposition. And staff at this time does not know of any opposition. So as Director Houston said, there's some great entities there that are in support. But just through our experience or through staff's experience, it's tough to say how this will go. And with the expectation that an amendment is forthcoming, but not having seen that amendment, it's tough to make a recommendation to the board. But that being said, obviously the board, it's their prerogative or your prerogative to take a position.
Yeah.
May I
Oh,
comment?
very good. Who did I hear?
This is Don Deere.
Yes,
Can you hear
Don.
me? Yeah, in listening to the presentation from staff, there really is no recommendation from staff on this item. And I think they're implying that we should wait and we may be premature in taking a stand in favor. So at this point in time, I'm not convinced that we should vote in favor of it, but we should wait. That's all I have.
Okay. Director Gray, did I hear you?
Yes, yes. Don, Director Deere actually made my comments. I think it's premature. The bill it seems like it's not in its final form. So what are we taking a position on I heard staff say that it probably will be amended based on conversation with the Assemblywoman's office. So I think it's premature because what are we taking a position on? If the bill is potentially to be modified. And there are entities out there who have a perspective on it, and we want to make sure we get all of those perspectives before we really need to be more informed before we take a position on it. I mean, there are different types of positions. Support is one. It could be support with other things added to it. I just think it's not the right time to take a position on it. I would like staff to come back with more information on it for the board to actually make a more informed position on it.
Okay.
So I will not be supporting a support.
Are you done, ma'am?
Yes.
Okay, to staff, what is the consequence of us not taking a position now? What would that do to West Basin?
At this time, in looking at the bill, the bill wouldn't actually impact West Basin either way. There is an opportunity for portions of the West Basin service area to benefit. And I hope you'll understand that staff does take some of these things in a very conservative light. We are just not sure of the opposition to the bill. And without knowing the specific language of the amendment, it's very difficult to make a recommendation at this time. And that's why staff does not have a recommendation.
Okay, any more discussion?
I do have a question. Well, let's just suppose if we supported it as it is, and then there was a change, what would happen? We could withdraw support if we didn't like the change, or maybe we really like the change, so then we just reiterate again our position on it. What are the options if it changed after we supported it as is?
You're 100% correct, Director Houston. We could withdraw our support. My guess is that with future amendments, all parties would probably come to an agreement, and then taking a support position at that time would allow everybody would be kind of on the same page. Staff's only concern is that supporting it as is would be to support the incorporation of the Biona wetlands or watershed into this expansion, which some in our service area will likely object to.
Do we know who they are yet?
Do we know who the
Who would it be objecting?
well, as I think most of us know, again, this is a very sensitive area. I mentioned to our general manager earlier today that through working through the Santa Monica Bay Restoration Commission, I have not once seen any project proposed in this area that did not lead to litigation. And so there are numerous stakeholder groups, so many that I'm not even aware of all of them, that are on one side or the other. And this is granting the authority to implement programs and projects in the wetland watershed. So that is staff's only concern, and it really is, I think, a conservative approach. But again, I can see some benefit to this. But my guess is, and my understanding in speaking to some of the stakeholders, is that the bill is likely to be amended. We just haven't seen those amendments.
Yeah.
Okay, any more questions?
Yeah, I do, Mr. Chair. Yes, can you hear me?
Yes, go ahead.
I sit on the Santa Monica Bay Restoration Commission representing West Basin, and EJ is absolutely correct. I think we need to be cautious, especially with the fact that the bill may be amended. I don't see the urgency to take a support position on a bill, on this particular bill, when the fact there may be some issues with some of the folks who can be affected by it. And I know by sitting on the Santa Monica Bay Restoration Commission that there have been a number of certainly litigation has gone on because of the issues relative to the bound of wetlands. So I would not like us to take a position on something that could be an issue when in fact that issue may be mitigated by an amendment. So I don't see the urgency to take any position And when you take a support position, it implies you support everything that language that's in that bill right now. So I don't see the emergency with doing this unless Director Houston can tell us what the emergency is, because I think we should wait and see what that amendment will be. And we'll have all the information and we'll know exactly what that bill will say.
Mr. Chairman?
Yes,
It's Don here. Mr. Chairman?
yes, go ahead.
Yeah, I'll move to table the motion.
Move to table.
Yeah, and I'll second it.
Well, Mr. Chair, this is O'Neill. That is
Yeah.
a substitute motion, so you have to address that first.
Yes,
It's not debatable, though.
Right, there's a motion to table, and it's been seconded. So before you can address the underlying motion, which is a motion to move with a support position, you have to address the substitute motion, which is the motion to table.
is that a substitute motion, Director Deere, that you?
Certainly
Committed?
is.
Okay, very good.
Can't debate it.
You've heard the substitute motion, and as you hear, we have to deal with that first before we go any further. Okay? So with that, should I
Call a roll.
call roll on that? All right,
Yes, roll call.
okay. Director Deere,
Yes.
Director Gray,
Yes, yes.
Director Houston,
No.
Director Alvarez,
Yes.
Director Williams, yes. So the substitute motion carries. This item is now tabled until when?
Until it's brought back before the body.
Okay. All right, thank you.
May I comment for 1 second?
Yes,
If there's a way our staff could please reach out to the parties who reached out to us, including the Assembly Member's Office, just to let them know what happened at this meeting. And then obviously they'll be in touch with us on next steps. And again, the sense of urgency really was not my own personal urgency. It was because folks reached out to us asking us to take a look. So, I was not pushing urgency. I was putting it to the board as groups had asked us to look at. So thank you.
very good. Thank you. All right.
President Williams, I have
Yes.
a question, please.
Mr. Chair, Mr. Chair, this is
Yeah.
Director Gray. I just want to make sure when information is given back to the Assemblywoman's office is that, that they know that the reason why this was tabled and because we need more information. And I think they will understand, but it's very important to explain exactly why this board did not take a position at this time, because we just need more information, knowing that it may be modified. But we are responsive to their request, but the reason why it was not granted with a position on it. Thank you.
Thank you. All right, then, that takes care of item
Director Williams, I have a quick question, please.
5B. Yes,
Yeah, sorry. So Director Houston, I just wanted to make sure I understood. So you want staff, which will be me, reach out to the Assemblywoman's office and Mr. McNeil? I think those are the two entities, right?
I believe those are the two, and there may have been another person who emailed us, but maybe EJ knows, but any group, because I think there were more than one that had gotten in touch with either me and I forwarded it to you guys, or they went directly to you, but all the parties, just let them be aware, okay?
Okay. Got it. Thank you, President Williams.
all right, thank you. So then that takes care of item 5B. So now we're to move to item 6,
Yeah, item 6, we have no information calendar.
item 7,
No
Closed
closed session, Mr.
No
Chair.
closed session.
item 8, director's comments, future agenda items. Hearing none, and then this meeting is adjourned. Now we'll move to the